Hi guys, welcome to a new FTMY21 video, and today we are looking at the suspension ball joints, the lower ones on the Fiat Panda, which are attached to the hub carriers, which are bolted up here with two bolts and nuts on the top for the hub carrier, and on the bottom, once the lower arm is removed, just down here, the lower arm is attached to the ball joint, as you can see there. Once that's removed and the top bolts are removed, we then have movement here. We just have to remove this drive shaft nut as well, and then we can slide the whole assembly off. Obviously the caliper will still be connected, so you've got to be careful with the hose, but once we have that off, we can then look to change the hub carrier so that we have a new ball joint on there. I'm going to start by undoing the 17mm nut, which is just under the lower arm here, which luckily has come off quite easily. I did wire brush it and WD-40 it a little while back, so obviously that helps. Always worth doing on suspension components on these cars. So we'll just take that nut all the way off, and then keep it safe. So next up, we want to look at getting those two bolts and nuts undone. We're not going to take them all the way off, we're just going to crack them off. So I've got a breaker bar, unfortunately the wrong size for my 19mm, so I've got an adapter that I'm just putting on. If it'll go on, there we go. And then there's our 19. We just want to see if we can undo it the correct way. I was about to go righty-tighty instead of lefty-loosey then. The bolt is 19mm as well. But at the moment it looks like we're not having to, let's just put this on the bottom one. Yep, they're coming undone nicely. So now what we can do is start undoing that with the ratchet, but we will start focusing on that axle nut next before we go too far. To start with, I've got a hammer and a couple of punches here, just so that we can knock out the tabs that have been pushed in on the drive shaft. Once we've just quickly tapped them out a little bit, then it'll come off much easier. Well, if you're particularly clever, you can do this job on the floor with the centre cap off and undo it. But I'm using a handy helper to press the brake pedal for me. And now I'm going to put a breaker bar with 30mm on the drive shaft nut. Now I'm going to get this, because the breaker bar is not enough on its own. Now I'm going to hope I'm going to undo it without breaking anything. Oh, yeah, there it goes. It's quite tight, but it needs to be tight, so that's a bonus. Then we take the drive shaft nut all the way off. So now we've got the drive shaft nut off and out of the way, we've got the nut off the bottom. We're just going to use a 19mm spanner and a 19mm socket to take the rest of this nut off the end, and then we'll get the bolts out after we've done the lower ball joint removal, because where the lower arm is attached to the ball joint, it doesn't just fall out of there. So I've got a special tool that I'll show you in a moment, and we'll take that off so that when we take these out, it can all come off as one, rather than it's quite hard to do the ball joint last, because otherwise the top here is just flopping around, which nobody wants. This hammer, oh no, we're going to be using the man's hammer for this one, and we have the ball joint splitter here. Now if you look here, obviously when you put this in, it's going to damage the dust cover on the ball joint, which in this case is fine, because that's what's ruined on ours anyway. Obviously if yours is good, then what you can do is tap the end of the lower arm as hard as you can, and it will actually drop out. I've done that on Jurassic Pandas when I've needed to do that recently. But because I'm not worried about the dust cover on this one, I'm just going to go straight in with the ball joint removal here, and yeah, even if it ruins it, doesn't matter, so that's fine. So now coming up close, you can see that the the lower arm is split from the ball joint, so we just need to push this down and take this out and take the bolts out the top, and then this will all come off because the drive shaft nut isn't on there either. So this part here can all slide off the end. And you may have just seen now, I just hit the camera on the bumper, and you may have seen in the previous video I just slightly hit my hand with the hammer at the end. You don't want to do that either, so yeah, don't do that. So as you can see here, I've now put this tub under here to take the hub carrier once it comes off. I've taken the bolts all the way out now, so I'm just going to push the strap back and then pull the of course it's gone back into there on the it's not all plain sailing, never is. I just have to quickly tap that with the little hammer to lift that out. And then obviously being careful of the drive shaft gaiter as well, as much as you can be, because it's all sort of in the way. Take that off and you take this out, and we put this out of the way. This is our little spacer behind the hub carrier, so we don't want to lose that either. And there we go. Just make sure that that doesn't go walk about. Push that back in on the inside there. And there we go, that's our old hub carrier off. So this is what we're left with. We have the drive shaft here, the lower arm, and of course the hub carrier with the brakes still attached. So there's just 4 bolts for this hub carrier. Obviously we will actually just retrieve this spacer and put it here so we don't lose it. Don't want to forget that when you put the drive shaft back in. So yeah, here is our lovely ball joint. You can see where I've split it a little bit more there, but yeah, it was all deteriorated. So it's definitely worth changing. So now that we've finally managed to get that off with a bit of faffing, I've realised it's going to be a lot easier just to take the caliper off, because we need to do the pads and discs anyway, and obviously this hose is in the way and it's not very easy to undo these 4 bolts with it on a brittle plastic box. So what I'm going to do is just I'll just use my little punch here just to take these clips out of the brake sliders, and then what I'm going to do, if that one will come out, I'll have to grab something else. Once that's out, then I will tap these little sliders back. Now these are super easy, these calipers, because once these have both tapped out the other way, because they've got like a little see, they've got a little lip there so that they can't go any further. Once they've both tapped downwards, then this literally just catches here and here, so you just lever it off, and then the caliper actually comes off. So I can then leave the or tie the caliper out of the way, and then we can deal with this, and then we can deal with the brake pads and discs at the same time, so we can kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Right, so the caliper is off. Admittedly, that's much easier when everything's back still on the car, but I'm here to tell you that things don't always go exactly as you think first time, because sometimes you don't think of exactly what you need to do first time. So anyway, it would have made it easier to do it that way, but obviously we can still do it this way anyway. So as I say, we've just taken out these little clips in the end, tap these out backwards, and then this literally just falls out. Once you've got it unlit from one side, it literally just pulls up. So that's that out, and we will push the piston back obviously before we put it all back together, because we're going to fit new pads. Even though these are obviously fairly recent, we're going to change them anyway, because the discs look like they could do with changing. They've been left out for a little bit now anyway, and obviously to get to the discs you have to take off this nut, which is attached to this piece, which attaches to one of the hub carrier bolts. So that needs to come out to do that anyway. So while we're here, we'll do that. And then there's another bolt holding the carrier here, and a bolt holding the carrier there. This one's obviously got a threaded stud coming up to hold this nut on, to hold this piece on. So you know, while it's all off, we'll just take all of this apart now, or at least we'll try, because obviously it's not on a vise or anything. I have managed to just quickly crack all of these off. I find it easiest by putting 1 foot there and then holding with my right hand there, and then just using a breaker bar to undo them slightly first, and then they're all they're all loose then. Obviously, if you've got a vice or an impact gun, everything is 1,000 times easier. But this is going with what I have at home, so that's what we're doing. And now I'm just going to undo all the bolts for these, and then we've got some shiny new carriers to go on. So with these 4 bolts off of here, this just falls off. This just falls off of here once you take this bolt out and this stud. I did mention it was a stud. It came out with the nut attached to the stud, so that's fine. Obviously just save your washer and make sure you put it down here so you don't lose it all. And then, yeah, that's all off. Now you want a shiny new hub carrier. Now I had these spare, so I wasn't worried about buying them. What you can do is take off the clips and hammer them this way in, the ball joints by themselves, and use the old hub carrier, and then obviously put the new one in and put the new clips in. But you know what, I had these spare and they're not actually that expensive. These ones came from Yahtzee 4x4 as spares, but you can also get them from Reassembly in the UK and get them off of eBay, Autodoc for example. So there's plenty of places you can get them, so they're not hard to find. But yeah, we're just gonna bolt that back on now. These are easy enough to get to when they're on the car, so what I'm going to do is bolt that on, and then we'll put it all back on the car and we'll sort out the brakes later on. So now I've just bolted those 4 17 mils back in. We now have one complete hub carrier that we can put back on. Obviously we do still want to change these discs, and we still want to put on the caliper carrier and fit the new pads, but we can do everything else with this on. So what we're going to do now is firstly try and jiggle it into the drive shaft area somehow. Then you want to move the drive shaft away from the strut, and then you want to sort of get the drive shaft to go in as the ball joint goes in, and then you want to make sure the ball joint goes in far enough so that the gear gator clears the strut even, and then looks like our ball joint is in quite nicely. Yeah, and looks like our drive shaft's in nicely. So I'm just going to push down and make sure. Looks like, yeah, just needed to turn that to make sure the drive shaft went all the way in. Make sure that's obviously right before you start just going all the way in. And then you want to line up the bottom ball joint, which is always a pain. Sometimes just get a screwdriver in to roughly guide you, and then obviously grab one of your bolts. You just want to roughly put that in. I'm not going to put them all in all the way because this is the carrier bolt on the bottom here as well. You know where that little piece was joining the caliper carrier to the hub carrier, that's where that one is, so we don't want to put that one in all the way. But once that's started, you can push the top in, he says, and then get the top bolt in. Should push in, there we go. And then obviously we've got a new nut for the bottom ball joint, so we're just going to do up the bottom ball joint. Normally if you weren't doing your pads and discs, you do up these top strap hub carrier bolts even now, and then you need to put your drive shaft nut back on and tap the end back in again, and once you've done that, that particular bit is all good. Okay, so it just occurred to me when my helper tried to press the brakes that the caliper's over here, so we can't do anything with that nut doing up yet. Obviously we want it to be extra tight. There's a torque rating in the Haynes manual which we will refer to when we do that. Obviously these are still roughly undone because we want to do those up when the spacer piece is back on. Spacer piece? I don't know what to call it. The piece that connects the carrier to the carrier. And yeah, I've just done up that ball joint one, so that's all fine. I just need to remember that these are currently undone and that that's currently undone, and obviously I need to do the other side anyway. But join us another time for a video on the brakes, and yeah, then I can do everything out properly. But if you're doing this yourself, make sure you do these up, and if you're doing the brakes, maybe just do them separately, or to take them off first and then put them back on afterwards. Anyway, thanks very much for watching, and take it easy. We'll see you in another one. Well, this is the other side. This is just to show you what the dust cover can be like. It can be completely deteriorated, and the inside could look like that. And well, it's meant to be a bit like grease in there, so that, you know, the ball joint can move freely, but that doesn't look like it's going to be moving very freely because it's full of mud and dirt. So yeah, that one's toast. Yes, so Remember this old guy that you're not meant to forget when you put it behind the hub carrier, where the bit where the drive shaft goes through? Well, yeah, I forgot him, so he will be going back on. I just need to undo this again, type these out again, take this off again, and then split the ball joint again, and then just put that on and put it all back together again and do it up. Nice.